Do you know someone who's trapped inside their own head? Someone who knows exactly what they need to do but can't pull the trigger. They analyze every decision to death, replay conversations that haven't even happened yet, worry about outcomes that may never come, and end up frozen, doing nothing at all. Maybe you've met someone who had a brilliant idea but talked themselves out of it before even trying. Or someone who's been planning to make a change for years but never actually starts because their mind keeps finding new reasons to wait, new risks to consider, new what-ifs to solve first. I know this pattern exists because maybe that person is you. Maybe you're the one who lies awake at night, replaying the same worries on repeat. Maybe you're the one who's missed opportunities, not because you weren't capable, but because your mind convinced you that you weren't ready, that the timing was wrong, that you needed to think about it more. Overthinking isn't just annoying, it's destructive. It kills confidence, destroys momentum, ruins relationships, and keeps you trapped in a mental prison where the same thoughts circle endlessly with no way out. But what if I told you there's an ancient method used by Japanese warriors that can silence that mental noise forever? A philosophy so powerful that samurai used it to stay calm and decisive even when facing death. A state of mind where thoughts exist but don't control you, where action flows naturally without hesitation or doubt. This method is called Mushin, and it literally means no mind. Before I explain exactly how it works, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment on what decision you've been overthinking lately. Many of you have shared how the philosophies we teach here have helped you break free from mental traps, and I read every single comment. The idea for this video actually came from several of you asking for help with anxiety and overthinking, so this is for you. Thank you for being here. I appreciate every single person watching. Now let's dive into the story. Today I'm going to tell you about a young man named Kenji. Kenji was 26 years old, and he'd spent his entire life trapped inside his own head. He wasn't stupid. Actually, he was quite intelligent. He graduated from university with good grades, spoke 2 languages, understood complex ideas easily. But none of that mattered, because his mind was his worst enemy. Every decision, no matter how small, became a mental battlefield. What shirt to wear in the morning turned into a 15-minute internal debate about what impression he'd make, what people would think, whether he'd look too formal or too casual. Ordering food at a restaurant meant reading the menu 5 times, weighing every option, imagining how each dish would taste, worrying about making the wrong choice, and finally picking something safe that he didn't even really want. But the real damage happened with important decisions. When it came time to choose a career path, Kenji spent 2 years in analysis paralysis. He made lists of pros and cons, researched every possible option, asked everyone's opinion, and changed his mind every week. By the time he finally decided, most opportunities had closed. When he met someone he liked romantically, he spent so much time calculating the perfect moment to express his feelings, planning the perfect words, imagining every possible response, that she eventually moved on with someone else, someone who simply acted while Kenji was still thinking. His friends called him careful. His family called him thoughtful. But Kenji knew the truth. He wasn't being careful. He was terrified of making mistakes. He wasn't being thoughtful. He was trapped in an endless loop of mental noise that never led to action, only more thinking. His mind was like a computer with too many tabs open, constantly buffering, never actually loading anything useful. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon. Kenji had applied for a marketing position at a company he'd researched for months. He'd prepared for the interview obsessively, memorizing answers to every possible question, rehearsing in front of the mirror, playing out scenarios in his head. He walked into that interview room more prepared than any other candidate. But when the interviewer asked him the first question, something happened. His mind went blank. Actually, that's not accurate. His mind didn't go blank. It exploded with thoughts. 1,000 considerations flooded in at once. Should he answer directly or give context first? Was his posture okay? Did he sound confident enough? Should he smile more, or would that seem fake? What if his answer wasn't what they wanted to hear? He froze. His mouth opened, but nothing intelligent came out. He stammered, backtracked, started over, apologized, tried again. The interviewer's expression shifted from interested to uncomfortable. 10 minutes into what should have been a 30-minute conversation, they politely wrapped up early. Kenji walked out of that building, knowing he'd failed, not because he wasn't qualified, but because his mind had sabotaged him. Again. That night, sitting alone in his apartment, Kenji had a realization that changed everything. The problem wasn't his lack of knowledge or preparation. The problem was that he had too much thinking and zero ability to get out of his own way. He called his uncle, the only person in his family who seemed to have his life together despite facing real hardships. His uncle listened quietly as Kenji explained what happened, the pattern of overthinking that had ruled his entire life. When Kenji finished, his uncle said something unexpected. "There's someone you need to meet. His name is Master Sato. He doesn't give advice. He doesn't do therapy. But he understands the mind better than anyone I've ever known. He helped me years ago when I couldn't move forward after your aunt passed away. Go see him tomorrow. I'll send you the address." The next morning, Kenji stood outside a small traditional dojo on the edge of the city. The sign simply read, Aikido Training Center. He'd expected maybe a therapist's office or a meditation studio, not a martial arts school. He almost turned around. This felt wrong. What would a martial arts instructor know about his mental struggles? But he'd promised his uncle, so he went inside. The space was simple. Wooden floors, white walls, a small shrine in the corner with incense burning. And sitting cross-legged in the center of the room was an old man, maybe 70 years old, thin but strong-looking, with perfect posture and an expression of complete calm. Master Sato didn't stand up or greet him with pleasantries. He simply looked at Kenji and said, "Your uncle told me you think too much." Kenji nodded, surprised by the directness. "Yes, I can't make decisions. My mind never stops analyzing everything, and I end up doing nothing." Master Sato was quiet for a long moment, then asked, "When you walked through that door just now, did you think about stepping, or did you just step?" Kenji blinked, confused. "I just stepped." "Exactly," the old man said. "Your legs knew what to do. Your body understood the action, but your mind wasn't involved. That's Mushin, the state of no mind, when you act without the interference of thought." Kenji frowned. "But I can't just turn my mind off. I've tried meditation. It doesn't work for me." "I'm not asking you to turn it off," Master Sato replied. "I'm asking you to stop obeying it. Your mind creates thoughts. That's what minds do. But you've made the mistake of believing that every thought requires your attention, your analysis, your response. It doesn't. Thoughts are like clouds. They appear, they float by, they disappear. You don't need to grab each cloud and study it. You just let it pass." Kenji felt frustrated. This sounded like philosophical talk that didn't actually help, but Master Sato seemed to sense his skepticism because he said, "I'm going to give you an instruction. For the next 3 days, whenever a thought comes, do nothing with it. Don't fight the thought. Don't chase it. Don't try to solve it or analyze it or figure it out. Just notice it appeared and let it be. That's all. Do you think you can do that for 3 days?" Kenji hesitated. That seemed both too simple and impossible at the same time. What if it's an important thought? What if I need to figure something out? "Then figure it out on day 4, Master Sato said calmly. "But for 3 days, you're going to prove to yourself that you can observe your mind without being controlled by it. Come back here in 3 days and tell me what happened." Kenji left the dojo confused and skeptical. How was doing nothing with his thoughts supposed to help him make decisions or stop overthinking? But he'd come this far, so he committed to trying. Day 1 was harder than he expected. Every thought felt urgent. His mind screamed that he needed to respond, to analyze, to figure things out right now. When he thought about the failed interview, his instinct was to replay it, dissect what went wrong, figure out how to fix it for next time. But he remembered the instruction: do nothing with it. So he noticed the thought appeared, took a breath, and let it sit there without engaging. It felt uncomfortable, like ignoring an itch. But the thought eventually faded on its own. Day 2, something small shifted. A friend texted asking if he wanted to meet for dinner. Normally, this would trigger a spiral. What restaurant? What time works best? Should he suggest something or wait for his friend to decide? What if he picked wrong? But this time, Kenji noticed the overthinking pattern starting, and instead of diving into it, he simply texted back, "Sure, you pick the place and time." Done. No analysis, no mental chess game, just action. Day 3, he woke up and realized his mind felt quieter, not empty. Thoughts still came, but they didn't hook him the same way. It was like his mind was still a river, but he'd stopped jumping in and getting swept away by every current. When he returned to the dojo, Master Sato asked, "What did you notice?" Kenji thought about it carefully. "I noticed that most of my thoughts don't actually need me to do anything about them. They just want attention, and when I don't give it to them, they go away on their own." Master Sato nodded with the smallest hint of a smile. "You've just discovered the foundation of Mushin. The mind will always create noise. That's its job. But you are not your thoughts. You are the space in which thoughts appear. When you understand this, overthinking loses its power." Now, Kenji, I'm going to teach you 4 principles that will help you maintain this state. Not just for 3 days, but for the rest of your life. These are the same principles warriors use to stay clear and decisive, even in battle. Are you ready to learn them? The first principle, Master Sato explained, is called the bow and the gap. In traditional Japanese culture, we bow before entering a room, before beginning a meal, before training. The bow creates a momentary pause, a gap between thought and action. In your life, before every decision, before every response, before every action, you must learn to create this gap. Not a long pause, just 2 seconds. 2 seconds where you breathe once through your nose and acknowledge that you're about to choose. This tiny gap interrupts the cycle of reactive thinking. Master Sato demonstrated by asking Kenji a question. "What's your favorite color?" Kenji's mouth opened to answer immediately, but the master held up his hand. "Stop. Pause for 2 seconds first." Kenji felt silly, but did it. He breathed in through his nose, held for a beat, then answered. "Blue." "See," Master Sato said. The answer didn't change, but your relationship to the answer changed. You didn't react. You responded. There's a difference. A reaction is automatic, controlled by the mind's habits and fears. A response comes from a place of choice. For the next week, practice the bow and the gap before every decision, before you reply to a message, before you order food, before you answer a question. Just 2 seconds. 1 conscious breath. That's all. Kenji left with this single instruction and started applying it immediately. At first, it felt awkward and slow, but after a few days, something remarkable happened. The 2-second gap gave him just enough space to catch the overthinking before it spiraled. He'd feel his mind starting to race. Then the gap would interrupt it, and he could choose a simple action instead of drowning in analysis. A week later, he returned for the second principle. Master Sato was practicing with a wooden staff when Kenji arrived. moving it in slow, fluid motions like water flowing around stones. He stopped when he saw Kenji and said, "The second principle is flow over force. Overthinking happens because you try to control outcomes through mental effort. You believe that if you think hard enough, long enough, you can predict every result and make the perfect choice. But life doesn't work that way. Life is like this staff." The staff moved gracefully in his hands. "If I try to force it into a position, it resists. But if I flow with its natural movement, it goes where I want, effortlessly." In your life, action must be small and immediate. One small movement beats 1 hour of mental planning. When you catch yourself overthinking a decision, you don't fight the thoughts. You don't force yourself to decide. You simply take the smallest possible action related to that decision and let the next step reveal itself. Kenji asked, "But what if I take the wrong action?" Master Sato smiled. "There is no wrong action in flow. There's only movement. And movement gives you information that thinking never will. When you act, even in a small way, reality responds. Reality gives you feedback. Then you adjust and act again. But when you only think, you're stuck in a closed loop with no new information. Let me give you an example. You're overthinking whether to start a new career. Your mind creates endless scenarios, pros and cons, fears and possibilities. This thinking could go on forever. But what's one small action you could take right now, today, that moves you even 1 millimeter toward that career?" Kenji thought about it. "I could research one company in that field." "Good. Do that today. Just one company. 5 minutes of research. Don't decide anything. Don't analyze if it's the right move. Just flow. Take one small action. Then tomorrow, another small action. And the day after, another. Before you know it, you've moved forward while your mind was still trying to figure out if it was safe to start." This principle hit Kenji hard because he realized he'd been trying to solve entire problems with thinking instead of taking tiny steps with action. He started applying flow over force to everything. Instead of overthinking a difficult email, he'd write one sentence, just one, then another. Instead of debating whether to exercise, he'd put on his shoes. Just that. No commitment to a full workout, just shoes on feet. And almost always, the first small action led naturally to the next. The shoe led to stepping outside. The sentence led to finishing the email. Movement created momentum. Thinking created paralysis. 2 weeks later, Kenji returned for the third principle. Master Sato was sitting in the garden behind the dojo, completely still, watching leaves move in the wind. He didn't turn when Kenji sat down beside him, just continued watching in silence. After a few minutes, he spoke. "The third principle is detach from outcome. This is the hardest one for people like you to understand because your overthinking exists, because you're terrified of consequences. You believe that if you think long enough, you can guarantee a good result and avoid a bad one. But this is an illusion. The future is uncertain, no matter how much you think about it." The samurai understood this deeply. When facing an opponent, if a samurai worried about being cut, he'd hesitate and be cut. If he worried about failure, he'd be too slow and fail. So they trained themselves to detach completely from outcome. They'd enter battle with full presence and skill, but zero attachment to whether they'd live or die. This might sound fatalistic to you, but it's actually the opposite. It's the most liberating state possible. When you stop trying to control what you cannot control, you become completely free to act with clarity. Kenji struggled with this concept. "But if I don't care about the outcome, why would I try at all?" Master Sato turned to look at him directly. "I didn't say don't care. I said don't attach. There's a difference. You care about doing your best. You care about showing up fully. You care about the action itself, but you release the desperate need for a specific result. Because that need is what creates the fear that feeds your overthinking. When you detach from outcome, you don't stop trying. You start performing. Athletes call this being in the zone. Surgeons call it flow state. We call it Mushin. You're completely focused on what you're doing right now, but you're not tangled up in anxiety about how it turns out. The outcome will be what it is. Your job is simply to act with full presence and let the result come. Kenji asked, "How do I practice this?" Every time you catch yourself overthinking about how something will turn out, Master Sato explained, you say to yourself, "I'll handle whatever comes." That's it. Not "I need this specific outcome," or "if this goes wrong, I'm finished." Just "I'll handle whatever comes." Because you will. You always have. You've handled every difficult thing life has thrown at you so far. You're still here. That means you're capable of handling what comes next, whatever it is. This simple phrase became Kenji's anchor. Whenever his mind started spinning disaster scenarios or desperately clinging to a hoped-for result, he'd pause and think, "I'll handle whatever comes." It didn't make the uncertainty disappear, but it changed his relationship with it. Uncertainty stopped being a threat and became just a natural part of living. A month after their first meeting, Kenji returned for the final principle. Master Sato was practicing with a student, demonstrating smooth defensive techniques. Kenji watched as the master moved effortlessly, never using more energy than necessary, redirecting attacks rather than blocking them with force. When the practice ended, Master Sato approached and said, "You're ready for the fourth principle, return to the body. Overthinking lives in your head. It's a mental activity disconnected from physical reality, but your body always knows what to do. Your body doesn't overthink breathing. Your heart doesn't debate whether to beat. Your body acts with wisdom that your mind cannot match. When you feel yourself spiraling into thought loops, the fastest way out is to return to your body." "How?" Master Sato demonstrated. "Stand up." Kenji stood. "Now feel your feet on the ground. Actually feel them. Notice the pressure, the temperature, the contact." Kenji did. "Take one breath in through your nose. Feel the air enter. Feel your chest expand. Then breathe out through your mouth. Feel the release. When you do this, where is your overthinking?" Kenji realized with surprise that his mind had gone quiet. It was still there, but the spiral had stopped. "Exactly," Master Sato said. "Thought lives in the head. Action lives in the body. When you return to physical sensation, to breath, to posture, to movement, the overthinking dissolves naturally because your mind can't be fully in two places at once. You can't simultaneously worry about an imaginary future and feel your breath in the present moment. This is why warriors train their bodies so intensely, not just for strength, but because physical presence is the antidote to mental chaos. From now on, whenever you notice overthinking starting, don't fight it mentally. Return to your body. Feel your breath. Feel your feet. Move your hands. Do a push-up. Take a walk. Any physical action that brings you out of your head and into the present moment. This became Kenji's emergency tool. When his mind started racing, he'd stop wherever he was, feel his feet on the ground, take 3 slow breaths, and the spiral would break. It was almost magical how effective it was. Not because it solved whatever he was overthinking about, but because it reminded him that he was a physical being in a physical world, not just a collection of anxious thoughts floating in space. Over the next 3 months, Kenji practiced all 4 principles daily: the bow and the gap before decisions, flow over force with tiny actions, detach from outcome when anxiety appeared, return to the body when thoughts spiraled, And something incredible happened. His mind didn't stop creating thoughts. That never changed. But his relationship with those thoughts transformed completely. He stopped seeing every thought as an emergency that required immediate attention. He stopped believing that more thinking would lead to better outcomes. He stopped treating his mind like an enemy to be defeated and started treating it like weather, sometimes calm, sometimes stormy, but always passing. His friends noticed the difference. He seemed more confident, more present, more decisive. But it wasn't that Kenji had become a different person. He'd just stopped being blocked by his own mental noise. His co-workers at his part-time job noticed he'd stopped second-guessing every small decision and just did things. His conversations became easier because he wasn't constantly calculating the perfect thing to say. He just spoke honestly and dealt with whatever response came. And most importantly, he stopped being afraid of himself. For his entire life, Kenji had been terrified of his own mind, scared that it would trap him, paralyze him, ruin things. But now he understood that his mind was just a tool that had been misused, like someone using a hammer to do surgery. The tool wasn't broken, he'd just been using it wrong. Master Sato explained this clearly during one of their last sessions. Your mind is designed to solve problems and plan for the future. That's its function. But you were using it to try to control uncertainty, which it cannot do. That's why it went into overdrive, constantly churning, never finding resolution. When you use your mind for what it's actually good at, specific problem solving and learning, it works beautifully. When you try to use it to eliminate all risk from life, it becomes a prison. Mushin doesn't mean having no thoughts. It means not being owned by thoughts. You have a mind, but you are not your mind. You are the awareness that notices thoughts appearing and choosing whether to engage with them or let them pass. That distinction changes everything. 4 months after their first meeting, Kenji walked into Master Sato's dojo and said, "I got an interview. Same company I failed at before. They have another opening, and they remembered me from last time. I'm terrified I'll freeze again. What do I do?" Master Sato looked at him calmly. "You do nothing different than what you've been practicing every day. The interview is just another moment. You bow before you enter. You create the gap before you speak. You flow with whatever questions come instead of trying to force perfect answers. You detach from whether you get the job and focus only on showing up fully as yourself. And if you feel yourself spiraling, you return to your body. Feel your feet. Breathe. Then speak." Kenji nodded, but his hands were shaking slightly. The master saw this and added, "Your mind will try to make this moment special, different, more important than all the others. But it's not. It's just another room, another conversation, another opportunity to practice what you know. The outcome doesn't define you. How you show up defines you." The interview was scheduled for Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock. Kenji woke up early, his mind already racing with scenarios, possibilities, fears. But instead of engaging with that noise, he practiced what he'd learned. He stood in his bathroom, felt his feet on the cold tile floor, took 3 slow breaths, and spoke out loud to his reflection. "I'll handle whatever comes." He put on his clothes without debating which shirt would make the best impression. Just picked one and moved forward. He ate breakfast without overthinking what would give him optimal energy. Just ate what he felt like eating. And when it was time to leave, he bowed slightly, created a gap, took 1 breath, and walked out the door. Sitting in the waiting room at the company, his mind tried one last time to spiral. What if they ask about the last interview? What if you freeze again? What if this is a mistake? But Kenji felt his feet on the floor. He took a breath, and he thought, these are just thoughts. They're not reality. Reality is, I'm sitting here. I'm breathing. I'm okay right now. When his name was called, he stood up, walked into the interview room and sat down across from the same interviewer who had seen him fail months earlier. The interviewer smiled politely and said, "It's good to see you again. I remember you seemed very nervous last time. How are you feeling today?" And in that moment, Kenji had a choice. His old pattern would have been to overthink that question, to analyze what answer would sound best, to calculate the perfect response that would prove he'd changed. But instead, he created the gap. 2 seconds, 1 breath. Then he spoke honestly. "I was nervous last time because I was so in my head that I couldn't think straight. I've been working on that. I'm still nervous now, but I know how to be present with it instead of fighting it. So I'm here. I'm ready to have a real conversation." The interviewer's expression shifted. That was a real answer, not a rehearsed script trying to sound perfect. For the next 30 minutes, the conversation flowed. When questions came, Kenji didn't try to force perfect answers. He created small gaps, took breaths, and responded honestly from a place of presence instead of calculation. When he didn't know something, he said so instead of spiraling into panic about sounding incompetent. And when the interview ended, he shook hands, thanked the interviewer genuinely, and left without immediately replaying every word he'd said, analyzing what went wrong, predicting the outcome. He simply walked out, felt the sun on his face, and thought, "I showed up. That's all I could control. The rest will be what it is." 3 days later, he got the call. They offered him the job. When he went to the dojo to tell Master Sato, the old man was sweeping the floors. Kenji rushed in with the news, expecting congratulations or celebration. But Master Sato just nodded and continued sweeping. Then he said something Kenji would never forget. "You think this story is about getting the job. It's not. It's about the moment you stop being afraid of your own mind. The job is just evidence that when you act from Mushin instead of mental noise, life responds differently. But even if you hadn't gotten the job, you still would have won because you showed up fully present. And that's the only victory that actually matters." Kenji understood. The transformation hadn't been about the interview. It had been about every single moment over the past 4 months where he chose presence over paralysis, action over analysis, flow over force. Now let me tell you something the scientists discovered about all of this. Researchers studying anxiety and decision-making found that overthinking activates something called the default mode network in the brain. This is the part of your brain that creates narratives, imagines scenarios, and replays memories. It's useful for learning and planning. But in people who overthink, this network becomes hyperactive. It's like a radio that won't turn off, constantly broadcasting static even when there's no signal. The more you engage with overthinking, the stronger this network becomes. Every time you indulge a worry spiral, every time you replay a past conversation, every time you imagine future disasters, you're literally training your brain to do more of that. It's a habit loop that strengthens itself. But here's what's fascinating. Studies on meditation, mindfulness, and flow states show that these practices directly weaken the default mode network. When you practice observing thoughts without engaging with them, when you return to physical presence, when you take action instead of analyzing, you're rewiring your brain. You're teaching it that thoughts don't require your constant attention. And over time, the mental noise actually decreases. It's not about willpower or forcing yourself to think differently. It's about changing the pattern of how you relate to your thoughts. Elite athletes and performers have known this for years. They talk about being in the zone, that state where action flows effortlessly without conscious thought. A basketball player in the zone doesn't think about shooting. The body just knows. A musician in the zone doesn't think about notes. The fingers just move. This is Mushin in action. And the research shows that anyone can learn to access this state more frequently. It's not a special talent. It's a skill that develops through practice. The same principles that helped Kenji are the same principles that help Olympic athletes perform under pressure. that help surgeons stay calm during complex operations, that help leaders make clear decisions in chaos. The principles are universal because the human mind operates the same way for all of us. Now let me ask you something. You've watched this far into the video. That means you recognized yourself in Kenji's story. That means you know what it feels like to be trapped inside your own head, to have your mind working against you instead of for you. So here's what I want you to do. I'm going to give you the same challenge Master Sato gave to Kenji. For the next 14 days, practice one thing, just one. When you notice overthinking appearing, create a 2-second gap. Pause. Breathe once through your nose. That's it. Don't try to apply all 4 principles at once. Don't try to transform your entire life overnight. Just practice the gap. 2 seconds, 1 breath. You might think this is too small to matter. That's exactly the point. It's so small that you can't make excuses not to do it. You don't need time. You don't need equipment. You don't need perfect conditions. You just need 2 seconds and 1 breath. And I promise you, if you practice this for 14 days, you will notice something shift. Not because those 2 seconds magically solve your problems, but because those 2 seconds prove to your brain that you can interrupt the pattern. You can catch the spiral before it takes over. You can choose presence over mental noise. After 14 days, if you want to continue, add the next principle. Start taking small actions instead of drowning in planning. Then add the third, practicing detachment from specific outcomes. Then add the fourth, returning to your body when thoughts spiral. But don't try to do everything at once. Remember what Kenji learned. One small step. Flow over force. You're not trying to become a completely different person. You're just trying to prove to yourself that you can observe your mind without being owned by it. And that proof, that small evidence that you're capable of this, is the foundation everything else builds on. In the comments, tell me one decision you've been overthinking. Don't tell me your whole plan to fix it. Just name it. Write it publicly. Because when you name something out loud, you take away some of its power over you. And maybe, just maybe, seeing your overthinking pattern written down will be the first step toward letting it go. I'll read every comment, and in 2 weeks, come back and tell me if the gap practice changed anything for you. Not if it solved everything, just if it changed anything, because small changes compound. 1 2-second gap becomes 10, becomes 100, becomes a completely different relationship with your own mind. You don't need to be perfect at this. You'll forget. You'll slip back into old patterns. You'll have days where the overthinking wins. That's part of the practice. Mushin isn't about never having thoughts. It's about not letting those thoughts own you. It's about remembering, in the middle of the spiral, that you have a choice. You can engage with every anxious thought your mind creates. Or you can create a gap, take a breath, and choose differently. The warriors who practiced Mushin weren't superhuman. They were just people who understood that the mind is a tool, and like any tool, it works best when you know how to use it properly. You already have everything you need. You don't need more information. You don't need a special technique. You just need to start practicing this one small thing. 2 seconds, 1 breath, 14 days. That's all. And if you do it, something will shift. Not because I said so, but because this is how the mind works. When you stop feeding the overthinking pattern, it weakens. When you start practicing presence, it strengthens. It's not magic. It's just how change happens. One small choice at a time, repeated consistently until it becomes who you are. Thank you for watching this far. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring enough about your own mind to look for answers. The fact that you're here means you're already moving in the right direction. See you in the next video. And remember, you are not your thoughts. You are the space in which thoughts appear, and that space is infinite, calm, and completely free.